did, and that's wonderful, but there's also a lot of people in our class that it was their second, third, even fourth time applying. So that's okay, and as far as I know for admissions, it doesn't look bad on you if you've applied numerous times. It's just
it's not a negative. Just don't give up.
Yeah.
If this is your passion, PA or bust, you know, we love that. I mean, that's a good thing.
Yeah,
But you know, if it's because of a low GPA, you know, please call admissions. Find out. Don't assume you know the reason why you didn't get an interview, or if you got an interview and got denied. Don't assume. Please call admissions. We will find out and tell you.
And that's something I didn't know, and I wish I would have, because you wonder, when you get told that you didn't make it, you think everything under the book. Did I not have enough hours? Did I not have a good enough GPA? And if it is something as simple as you don't have hours, you can easily fix that. If you sign up to start volunteering within a year, even if you only do 1 day a week, you can easily get so many hours, and you can fix whatever that problem might have been. So, and it's a nice confidence booster if that's the reason. If you find out you just didn't have enough hours, but they liked you, or you were competitive, that's a really encouraging thing to know that, you know, I have a chance, I can do this. My biggest thing is just don't give up, because there's a lot of people in our class, like I said, myself included, that we did apply multiple times, and it does get a little disheartening after a couple cycles, but I promise if you want it enough, it'll be worth it and it'll happen.
Definitely.
Do you want to talk about classes?
Sure, if there's any, the curriculum style
Yeah.
will be different from DO, but
Did you mention, you said after like the third year, you have to retake classes? Do classes expire or?
So again, it depends on each program, but like Tina was mentioning, like I know for mine it was anatomy and physiology, because I took that my freshman or sophomore year, and I actually did 5 years in undergrad because I wanted to do a second minor, so I took an extra year. So that already kind of limited my time frame a little bit, but from the time, so I took my anatomy in 2011, I think. So yeah, I had, preferably they wanted me, you know, by 2016 I should have been in the class, or depending on what school you're looking at, because they don't want it to be too long, because
You can forget or something.
yeah, and it's not, I mean, we do reviews in class, but by no means is it going to be like a week where we stop and go talk about anatomy. It's going to be maybe 20 minutes at the beginning of each section. We'll kind of touch base on it and then move on. And they're doing that because they know that you already have this ground base of knowledge about the anatomy. So by no means is it you have to have it down pat, but they want you to have the good knowledge of it, and we can kind of review the things that are a little hazy, but the longer you wait, the more you're going to forget. If you haven't, like in my case, I didn't use it. I didn't go into anything, I didn't go into further education right after undergrad. So I took it upon myself when I got in. I did an anatomy review prior because I knew that was something that I hadn't done for a long time, and I didn't want that to be a reason that I was struggling. So they have a reason for it, because they don't want it to be too long to where you haven't seen it in a very long time.
again, some schools will tell you on their website if it's a requirement. For us, we always put recommended. So if it's 6, 7 years old when you apply, you can still apply and possibly get in. Maybe everything else on your application was really strong. So that was the only one downside that you had, maybe. Possibly still get an interview and still get an invite.
How is that like rated? Is there like a point system? Like if you have that many hours, like okay, this is like strong or something, but
Yeah.
for GPA.
Yeah, they kind of have a little rubric.
Okay.
All programs have their own. They're all different from
Yeah.
each other, but they like to. It's a weighing. You know, you're a little low on this, but you're really high on this, and you got another high. You know,
Yeah.
kind of a balancing act going on when they read files. We call that a holistic approach to reading our applications. And so, if you got the interview, pretty much you passed. You know, the GPA and all the hours and everything. Now it's, do you fit in? Do you fit the mold of what ATSU is looking for?
What is the interview process like? What kind
Interview
of
process is fun. Have you had one in a while? Where, where you sit in on lunch or?
Oh, on the lunch ones?
Yeah.
I did, I
Okay.
think the last one.
Okay.
I like it, I think it's
We
fun.
interviewed through January, I think. We start pretty early, August or into July.
I think our first one was end of July this
Yeah,
past
they
year.
bumped it up and then we only interviewed through January. But, yeah, the interview, Again, we're trying to be more holistic, looking at you in different facets. So I think they're going to change things a little bit. There's a group activity, a general sit down with faculty, have your normal, interview that you're expecting. There's a presentation actually in the very beginning of the morning. The chair of the department goes over the curriculum. What else does he talk about?
Just kind of talking about what, like, he goes a lot on the mission because it is very important to our faculty and our students that we abide by that, kind of follow that. It's not just there because it's something we really believe in. He talks about that. He talks about kind of life as a student and what should be coming, what to expect.
Also, does he talk about the community health centers and
Yes,
rotations?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So I mentioned earlier the rotations, how it all works, how a DO student would choose if they were admitted. So PA, I think there's 70 in a class, every cohort, and do you know where you're going now? Okay, so PA starts in June. I think by the time you guys apply, it's going to be moved to a July start date, but anyway. You don't do the same choosing of rotation sites as the DO students do. You don't find out where you're going till February, and she started in June. She didn't find out till this February where she's going to be heading in August. So they do they have their sites to pick from, the whole cohort, and they rank them. And they do this little match spin thing. I don't know how they do it, and then
A lot of statistics.
where did you end up?
I'm staying in Arizona.
Okay,
Yeah.
so maybe she got lucky, got her
I
first
did.
choice.
I did.
Did they do like a percentage, how many got their first choice?
They do, they haven't released it to us yet, but I know they do that, so for the incoming class, they know, because I know last year, 91% of the last year's class got their first choice,
Okay.
first or second.
Okay.
So yeah, we actually have 9 community health centers. We have 4 in California, 1 in Yuma, Arizona, 1 in Wichita Falls, Texas, 1 in Oklahoma, 1 in Georgia, 1 in Louisiana, and then the vast majority of our students will stay in Arizona. Well, I say the vast, there's like 25 of us, so a little less than half. So we get presentations throughout the year where the director will either come in or they'll Skype over, because Georgia and Louisiana are a little further. And they'll kind of present on what they have, why their community health center is a little bit different than the others. And then we get to, we rank them 1 through 7. So we pick our top 7, and then we go into the spin, which they assign, I don't know, they do a lot of statistics, they assign it, and then we find out. So we just found out a month ago where we're gonna be, so.
So let's say there's a guy in your class, and he's married, has 5 kids. Maybe he's got a couple in high school, and they don't really want to move. Is that a good reason to choose staying in Arizona?
I would think so.
Do they
Do they expect that?
take that into consideration for, no, okay.
Children, houses,
No,
none of
nothing
that
like that.
factors in.
Oh, owning a home, having a mortgage here,
No.
there's a lot of people that
Yeah.
are older, in mid to upper 20s or even in their 30s that have already built a life,
Mhm.
and they don't really want to go anywhere else for a year, but
Unfortunately, or fortunately, kind of
Okay.
depends on how you look at it. It's nice because it's an even playing field across. There's no priority given to, unfortunately, we do have some people that have young children. I think for the most part, they all got their first choice where they wanted to go. But because you have children or because you have a home here, if you're married, it doesn't matter. So if you're one of those, that's kind of unfortunate. But for everybody else, it is a very equal playing field. It doesn't look at your GPA, it is truly just based on, they're trying to get as many people into their top choice or second choice as possible to make everybody happy.
Does everybody get in? Like, is that a thing? Because I know I hear you guys saying like people are accepted, so it's like everybody gets in, but it's just not your first or second choice.
For the clinicals,
Yeah.
yeah, everyone gets a spot to go,
Okay.
but it just might not be your first or second choice. I think we only had a couple that went to their 3rd or 4th. For the most part, our class was very spread out. A lot of people really wanted to go other places, so it worked out well for us.
and I think when we add on to that, because we're private and we're not trying to fill seats from Arizona residents in our class, literally, I think on your stats, the sheets I gave you, the percentage of out-of-state PA students or DO or whatever
It's
is
almost 50-50.
extremely high.
Yeah.
Because we're private, we don't have this in-state tuition, so I think why we're chosen is maybe the curriculum, how we teach, our mission statement is why people choose us. Maybe a little unique, little different, that we have community health centers as our rotation sites. That's all a little bit different than some of the other schools. And, you know, let that be your reason for choosing us, not because we're down the street. Because again, you could be placed in Georgia, but it is only a year, it's a sacrifice if you are married, have kids, or whatever the reason is, mortgage. It is a little bit of a sacrifice, but I want to say that year probably goes very quickly, and you just have to budget. If you have little kids, I would think moving is easy. It's when they're more in high school and they're planted and very hard to move kids at that age, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
And there's definitely good and bad to both. I know, like, obviously if you want to stay here because of family or whatever reason, we have more places to rotate between, but I do know the community health centers because they're, again, we do underserved, so they're in a lot of underserved areas, so the students are getting extremely hands-on and they're doing a lot of things that you might not do in a bigger city because in the smaller towns, they don't have access to go to a specialist here, there, and everywhere. Like they have, it's whoever's there, you're treating everything. So I know I've heard from a lot of upperclassmen or above me that they get to do a lot of really neat things that they might have not gotten to do in another setting because they are in such small, well, not very small, but they're just in underserved areas. Yeah.
I wanted to ask beforehand, transitioning to volunteering, where did you volunteer to get your hours?
So I did a little bit, kind of everything. I volunteered.
You say you were here in Arizona, are you staying?
Yeah, but I was born and raised in Arizona, so I did a lot of my volunteering here. One of the things I think is neat, obviously you're interested in the medical field, so if that's where you want to volunteer, that's great. But when I talked to somebody and the admissions when I was starting, I thought it was really cool that you don't have to volunteer in a medical field. You can volunteer in whatever you are interested in. So whether it is, the homeless shelters, I volunteered a lot at animal shelters. My biggest things, I love kids. I volunteered with Phoenix Children's Hospital. They put on a camp every year called Camp Rainbow. It's for kids with cancer. So for 6 years, I went and spent a week with them. So I got a large chunk of my volunteer hours from that and doing events with them throughout the year. I also volunteered with a homeless shelter. I volunteered.
So it's a variety, you don't have to base it off on medicine?
No.
No.
So like I said, those 3 areas that you're gonna be jogging your hours down, the villain, so just.
So clinical shadowing, where did you do the clinical?
So
you need clinical experience and shadowing, right? So volunteering can be broad.
Volunteer
Yes.
can be anything you want as long as you're giving your time to
And
help.
choose underserved populations.
Mhm. For my clinical shadowing, I lucked out. I found someone, a PA through the camp that I volunteer at, and she was an orthopedic oncologist PA. So I actually shadowed her for 3 years. I lived up in Flagstaff, so I would actually drive down every single week to spend 2 days shadowing her on my off days and then go back up because Flagstaff didn't have really a lot of opportunity. And then I actually got hands-on clinical experience with her because she taught me to scribe, and I was also able to help with wounds, and I was not an MA, but she would let me assist with that, and I was able to get some of that hands-on clinical experience.
So you don't need to have like some type of certification to be able to do the clinical?
To shadow? I didn't. I know a lot of people in my class. There were a lot of MAs, a lot of CNAs, EMTs. Those all take time though. I know of those, I think the CNA is the shortest amount of training you need. But scribing, there's a lot of people who scribed and they would work in the ER, and that was how they got their experience because it was a paid thing and they were able to be right there in the rooms with what was going on, so that was how they got their
So that
experience.
could be clinical and shadowing and be described?
Do your shadowing separate. Yeah.
What do you?
Yeah, she's a different doctor.
What do you do for like shadowing?
So for the shadowing, I shadowed the orthopedic oncologist, and then when she trained me to scribe, that's when I separated them. So up until that point, I was shadowing, and then when I was starting to learn the computers and learn the patient interaction, that's when I started. So in my hours, like I think it was from July of 1 year to June, I was shadowing, and then from July of that year to June of the next year, it was my clinical experience because I was doing more. I wasn't just watching. I was getting hands-on with the patients. So it was with the same person, but they were separate. So the timing was different as well as the responsibility.
Yeah, you want to make sure you're really drawing that line. And I think for now, as you're jogging it down, because you guys are a few years from applying, it's okay to, but always keep that in mind. At some point, when you fill out the app, you're going to need to decide if you got all these hours of shadowing, volunteering, clinical, where am I gonna put that? You just see where the weak parts are
Yeah.
and you can put it there.
Yeah. Because there's gonna be a lot of overlap on certain
Mhm.
things, and if
Yeah.
that's the case, like
Exactly.
you said, you can, if you have a lot of volunteer but not so many clinical experience, you can kind of move
And what's
those.
the
Right.
time period, they want for the volunteer, like the dates, like between 1 year?
I don't think there is one.
There's no
If you've
limit.
been volunteering
You
since
got
you
it
were
done something 5
5,
years ago.
Yeah.
Jot it down now.
I have a volunteer
And-
since high school, so that.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
that's
oh,
fine.
yeah, but always make sure you've got you've got, consistency
Yeah.
throughout. You didn't like, whoa, what happened in those 10 years? I didn't do anything, you know, so.
Because I graduated high school with over 300 hours.
Yeah, that's great, that's
So-
good on there. You never wanna rule anything out,
Okay.
again, like research, even though we don't care if you have 0 hours, you still put it on there. You get some kind of credit, okay, that's great, she did some research in oncology or, cancer research, whatever, you know, so that's fine, that's fine, yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like, I've made so many hours out of high school, I don't wanna like.
No, those are great, but like Tina said, you just wanna make sure you're still, even if it's
Yeah.
once a week, even if it's once a month that you can,
Mhm.
that's the only time, you wanna make sure you're still doing something, just
Yeah.
so
You
it's,
just stop
yeah,
because you reached the max.
exactly.
Not the
That's-
maximum
you
level
don't-
that we were testing.
exactly, cause that just shows that you literally did
The minimum.
the minimum and then you stopped, and that was all you were worried about, was reaching that goal.
I think the problem is too, time really does fly, and you guys are starting early enough, which is great, to fit in an hour here, an hour there, a Saturday for 5 hours, you know, and really logging that down, because it does add up really well. But again, if you don't do anything, I'll do that later, I got plenty of time, I got 2 years till I apply, that really just flies by so quickly, and then you're stressing to fit it all in. Boy, I need 500 hours of volunteering, how am I gonna get that in now? Because you might work, you go to school, you know, so it's hard to squeeze things in, but doing the hour here and an hour there is so nice to just keep that in mind all the time as you're going through your weeks.
Okay, quick question, like, what if you just do like a one-time volunteer experience?
Yeah,
Like,
I
you
mean,
put that on there?
consistency's fine too. Let's say you find a project, like she did with the camp. Some people might be connected and know a doctor that flies to Guatemala every summer and stays there for 5 weeks and gives free medical care. And you're tagging along, you know, that's wonderful. Yeah, that's a good thing.
Okay.
Just try to have, I would say, 300-400 hours or more by the time you apply. So here's the thing too, you know, I stressed applying early, but let's say you're applying this year and it's the end of April and you have this wonderful trip coming up in August. Well, you could put it on there and say you're going to do it, but if we get your app in July and we actually read it because it's a complete app, we won't count that wonderful trip or whatever you're gonna do in August, because that hasn't happened yet. So if you need those hours to really boost, you know, your application, and you say, oh boy, I better wait and submit in August after this is done. No, that's way too late. So maybe you want to rethink applying another year. Yeah, so that's kind of one of those things. Don't apply late though, don't apply in August. Even July sometimes is way too late for PA, just for PA, not med. That's med's still fine.
It's just very highly competitive.
PA is
so
such
you
a
don't-
short period. It opens end of April, and then our deadline is September 1. But again, I didn't say that, don't
Yeah.
listen to deadlines, you know? So
Yeah.
applying in August, that's such a short application cycle for DO. It starts in May and it doesn't end till March. That's like, what, 9 months? Yeah, so PA is a little small window, you wanna get in early.
And something to keep in mind too is that there's always, almost every school has a secondary application. So if you wait until the very last minute, even though you made that first deadline, you might not make the secondary. So you wanna keep that, you just really don't wanna wait until the last minute.
Good point. I'm pretty sure all schools have a secondary, and so that first application is the primary, that's just like the profession. And then your secondaries, they're gonna ask you questions specific to the school. So do read up the mission statement of all the schools you're applying to. It'll probably be questions like that. Yeah.
Hang on, hold on a second. Really quickly, just for our program, they kind of talked about the medical school, how they learn and how their curriculum is set up. Ours is a system-based curriculum, which I think I like it. I'm a very organized person, I need that to kind of follow along. So we do it in blocks. Like our very first one was ENT, and then we just kind of endocrinology, and then we move to ENT, and then you do pulmonology, and then you do cardio. And even though it's obviously all correlated because it's one body, makes it more comprehensible when you are doing it in little sections. So you focus on that, and then we'll bring in some stuff that we've learned already. But that chunk is just heart, or it's just lungs, and it makes it a little easier for you to try to take it all in, because there is a significant amount of information that you're getting in 14 months. So that's something that sets us apart, I think, and it just makes it a little bit easier to try to take that all in, because no matter what you do, it's gonna be hard, because there's a lot of information in such a little bit of time. But that one, I really like that about our program.
Yeah, for dental school, it's very similar. I think it's an AT still thing, I'm not really sure. Because the DO school, they call it clinical presentation model, they have to somehow take that 2-year didactic and make it into little sections. And so they do it that way, based on, how the patient's gonna come to you with different symptoms. And then PA, so dental does it pretty similar to PA, but they call it the module system. But they take these little chunks of just a very specific area in medicine or dentistry, and they learn it for straight 8 hours a day for a week, take an exam and move on to the next topic. So that's how dental works, and it sounds like you guys are pretty similar.
Yeah, ours isn't, I think theirs is a little more aggressive, where they're doing exams every week. Ours are normally 4 to 6 weeks, so
Okay,
we still, that's a little testing, but not as
so
not as much.
systems based,
Yes.
yeah, okay. Yeah, that's another good question. Once you learn more and more and more, those are the questions to ask different schools. What kind of system do you have? Education curriculum style. Yeah.
I never thought about that.
It definitely, like you said, when you're getting closer, depending on how you learn, it makes a big difference. Because if you have a school that, like I said, for me, that's how I needed to learn. If there was another person, the medical school, I don't know if I could do it that way, because that's not how I learned. Whereas PA, that was a big deal for me. Some people, it doesn't matter, they'll adjust to it one way or the other.
It is what it is, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
But if that is something that is important to you, like it was for me, that's something to really look into.
Yeah.
So in summary, we need to do volunteer hours, which is clinical, volunteering, and shadowing, and then having a good GPA, having the requirements. I've heard of also doing research, is that part of it, or?
Again, I mentioned this earlier, if you have no research, you are a fine candidate.
I had no research.
For any of our programs. However, there is a part to put that on there, and please do if you have done that. That's another way to add to your well-rounded application, that this is who I am, this is what
Does
I've
it matter
dabbled
the
in.
year?
Huh?
Does it matter the year?
No.
It makes you as an applicant stand out. Like I said, I had no research. The girl I sit next to every day, she did nothing but research for a solid year. So it differentiates you from somebody else that's applying, but it's definitely not, like Tina said, not a
Yeah.
requirement.
And her colleague she's just talking about probably maybe took a year off to do this, I don't know, but just think, she had done that and volunteered and shadowed and had to do all this clinical to make her application strong.
Yeah.
So if you're just starting out and trying to build, just, you've got enough on your plate, don't do research.
Yeah.
Unless you're trying to get into a school that wants to see research. That's the only reason I say do it. Or unless it's it's in your heart, I really want to be involved in research. It might help me when I'm a physician or a PA to have that background of research. Some people want to do that just to be well-rounded in themselves, and that's okay, that's your story. There's nothing wrong with that. But you got so much to worry about, I've got to get this, and this within my 2 years. You can leave research out. Yeah, I hope that answered that.
Just want to have that summary.
You can always call me
Correct.
later, my business card is up there, feel free to reach out to me. Also too, the PA students in their second year, they're off at their rotation sites. Most of them are out of state. If there's someone, you're interested in learning more about what is it like to be an AT Still PA student at Georgia or at wherever, please email me, I'll match you up with a student to email and ask those questions. Same thing with medical, and they're happy to help. Yeah. So, I think that's it.
Awesome, thank you so much, really appreciate it.
Oh, Jennifer?